At last. Welcome, Neo. As you no doubt have guessed, I am Morpheus.
It's an honor to meet you.
No. The honor is mine. Please, come, sit. I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole. You can see that. I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth. Do you believe in fate? No. Why not? Because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life. I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter. Try it. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix?
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to episode, what is this now, 14? I think it's number 14 of the Read Rothbard Podcast. My name is Daniel, and with me, as always, is Robert Johnson. How are you today, Mr. Robert Johnson? coming sky with fluffy white clouds and a slight breeze coming across left to right. It's real nice. You're going to have a good day.
Well, that does sound nice. That does sound nice.
Yeah.
So what if I told you that we're going to talk about the Matrix today?
I would not be surprised, because that is what we decided to do.
That's true.
You're blowing my mind, dude. Yeah, that sounds great. That's all we have, as far as I know, unless you got some extra stuff. So this might be a little bit of a shorter episode, but you can actually talk about the Matrix for quite a while, so we'll find out.
Yeah, well, they did make 3 films out of it, plus the Animatrix and a bunch of fan fiction and a bunch of theories and a whole bunch of other stuff. And, even when we don't have much to talk about, like some of our previous episodes where we had no idea what we were going to talk about, we ended up going for like an hour, hour and a half, and having a boatload of stuff anyway.
Yeah, we can make up as you go along. So,
well, you know how we do.
Well, I watched the movie again last night, and this is one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. And we can get into that, why that is. And it's actually interesting to see this movie. It's so multifaceted and it means so many different things, because it plays off some fairly universal themes. So it means so many different things to so many different people. And we'll just get into it. It's quite interesting. I'm curious to see what you're going to come at it from. I was surprised to find out what I found out when I did my research. And it kind of gives me a new look at the movie that I didn't have before. Doesn't sully my view too much, but maybe just a little bit. We'll see.
All right. Well, hey, why don't we play a clip? I've got a clip of Morpheus explaining what the Matrix is. It's about 2.5 minutes. Once that's done, why don't you give us just a brief overview of maybe the story, and then we'll get into it.
Sure.
All right. Here we go with Morpheus explaining to Neo what the Matrix is.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress?
I was...
Look again. Freeze it.
This isn't the Matrix.
No. It's another training program designed to teach you one thing. If you are not one of us, you are one of them.
What are they?
Sentient programs. They can move in and out of any software still hardwired to their system. That means that anyone we haven't unplugged is potentially an agent. Inside the Matrix, they are everyone, and they are no one.
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
Someone.
I won't lie to you, Neo. Every single man or woman who has stood their ground, everyone who has fought an agent has died. But where they have failed, you will succeed.
Why?
I've seen an agent punch through a concrete wall. Men have emptied entire clips at them and hit nothing but air. Yet their strength and their speed are still based in a world that is built on rules. Because of that, they will never be as strong or as fast as you can be.
What are you trying to tell me? That I can dodge bullets?
No, Neo. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to.
Well, all right. He does indeed dodge bullets in this film. Why don't you give us a quick rundown on the film itself there, Robert?
Oh, Keanu. Really not the best actor. Just he didn't have to do a whole lot in that movie.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. He can be so wooden and terrible as he is in all of his films, and in this one it works. It works out because it's so good in spite of him. He didn't need to be a good actor.
Right. So the plot of The Matrix, for those of you who aren't aware, this movie came out, 1999? So this is 17 years ago now. So probably you've seen it. If not, spoilers. Okay, so it involves one guy's quest to find out what the Matrix is, and he finds out that it is, surprise, surprise, a computer program, and the world is not what he thinks it is. He thinks it's 1999, but it's actually something more like 2199 or whatever in the far-flung future, where there was a war between man and AI, or sentient machines, and at the time, the sentient machines were solar-powered. So man blocked out the sun, basically, who knows, polluted the sky somehow, blocked out the sun, so the machines were forced to find some new power source. And thanks to sci-fi science, the machines took humans and turned them essentially into batteries, and they just kind of glossed over it by saying some form of fusion is now they have all the power they need. So it's Neo's hero journey to find out what the Matrix is, and he runs in and finds into Morpheus, who has this ship, and there are very few humans that are born outside of the Matrix. They're born in this place called Zion, down near towards the core of the Earth. Who knows how far down, but far down where it's still warm, they say. So there are very few. There's like a resistance fighting the machines, and Neo joins up with them and finds out that he is some sort of a special guy, and his ability to break the rules of the Matrix and basically do whatever he wants. And it's his journey to do that. And on a personal note, this movie is paced brilliantly. The very first movie is superbly paced. Scenes flow from one to another. It's a really, really good action-adventure journey. And that's probably one of the main reasons. It's got a whole bunch of cool kung fu, and at the time, really revolutionary special effects. This movie was copied and aped dozens, if not hundreds of times afterwards. It was really revolutionary in the way it kind of showed action. And no, those kind of effects are, either ubiquitous or they're kind of passé. But for a reason, they were incredibly popular at the time, and it was quite a shock to audiences at the time to see this sort of thing. So yeah, that's basically what the story is. Daniel, do you have anything else to add on a story?
Well, yeah, there's a whole lot of nitty-gritty beyond it. Most people, like you said, have probably seen the film by now, and so, if you haven't, pause this episode now, go watch it, and then come back, because we'll just assume that you've seen it. But yeah, so it is, almost your traditional hero adventure story. They're the reluctant hero. They're unaware of their special purpose, and then they gain confidence in themselves and in their skills and abilities by the end of the film, so that they actually do realize that they have that skill set, to kind of make it all wrap
it's a
up
typical
nicely.
Hero's journey. It's like you get your hero, reluctant hero. You got this kind of searching for something, like your Luke Skywalker searching for something, and then you get your mentor Morpheus, who's like your Yoda character, who kind of shows you the ropes, and then you develop your special powers, and then you defeat the bad guy at the end.
Yeah,
it's fairly paint by numbers, but in the way it's done was quite new for the time, for sure.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I think people read into it. In our previous episode about Lord of the Rings, we talked about allegory and how Tolkien didn't really care for it so much, and he was trying to tell more of a timeless story that was a struggle of good versus evil, power versus freedom. And I almost want to say that this is similarly built. It's not necessarily an allegory per se. You can read a lot of things into it depending on your background and where you come from. There's myriad of theories about what each of the things mean, but I think one of the more common and open ideas is that it's analogous to the world of today, where people aren't able to see sort of the corruption and the sort of the wool is pulled over the eyes of the people, so they go to politicians and the political process to try to make the world a better place, when that's really a false dichotomy. It ends up making things worse. Now, you got any comment on that? You want to expand on that at all?
Well, it's funny you bring that up. That would be a fairly libertarian view of it. So let me break it down. Basically, this is breaking it down from a philosophical point of view. Going back, there are clues in the movie itself. First of all, when the scene in which Neo is sitting at his computer and Trinity has hacked it, and she's saying, you need to follow the white rabbit. And then people knock on his door, and he sells them a thing. And he pulls this thing out of a book called Simulacra and Simulation by Jean Baudrillard. And I probably butchered that name. And that book is about how people are being exploited by representations or imitations of things. So almost like you're imitating, kind of like modern day football would be an imitation of actual gladiatorial combat, that sort of thing. Like you would, one example I suppose is like running, like jogging as like a recreational activity, whereas before and back in prehistory, like you would run because you would need to survive to get away from a thing. So you're kind of simulating an actual thing by doing a version of it that's not quite the same thing. And that guy, Jean Baudrillard, was very much, and here's where it gets interesting for me, is very much inspired by the works of a guy named Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Marx was very much all about the workers being exploited by the ruling class. So you have the people being exploited by the machines for their power, their electricity. The exploitation is only possible because the working class does not perceive it as being exploited. So the people are unaware. They're just living in this matrix, and they're being exploited, and they don't even know it. But once Neo becomes aware of it, you can fight back against it. The working class misunderstands its own position because it's confused and distracted by social messages that give workers a distorted explanation of how they fit into the world. These are my words. This is a guy online who was talking about Marx and the Matrix, and we'll have that linked in the notes below. I don't have it right here with me. But Engels actually coined the term false consciousness, talking about how people are essentially exploited by capitalism, and they don't even know it, so that they just continue to work and toil for these ruling class, the bourgeoisie, and only through knowledge and opening up your mind and understanding the real world of things can you rise up and fight back and blah, 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 the whole communist ideas. So it's interesting from my point of view how, from one hand, you can take it as a very kind of liberating message, and you can take an actual libertarian view like you did, but in reality, it was actually inspired very much by a bunch of commies. Is your blood running a little red over there, comrade? What's going on?
No, that's an interesting take. It seems like you bring whatever your background is to anything that you're intaking as new, and you'll view it through that lens, based on information that you already know. Like you understand the construct of certain things. And this is similar to what we were saying in the last episode, where you have to use certain elements as markers to be able to place yourself within it, or so that you have an understanding of it. So it's kind of an interesting thing that many people can view things from their own perspective and get totally different messages out of it.
Yeah. So just a little more evidence for this whole Karl Marx thing. In the movie, Morpheus, when asked what the Matrix is, he responds with, "The Matrix is control." So from Marx's view, or from someone looking at it from a Marxian view, it would be the control of the bourgeoisie over the proletariat. Farther back, and I'm not sure, it seems to be that Marx was influenced by Plato, but I could be wrong. I know Plato's Republic, I don't think he would have anything to do with necessarily government. Or would you say that Marx's end goal was to have no government, is that right? But in the meantime, we need to even everything out. So you have Plato's allegory of the cave, and this is almost essentially identical to the Matrix if you look at it. Plato explores the idea that the real world is an illusion. He imagines a cave in which people have been kept prisoners since birth. These people are bound in such a way they can only look straight ahead, and on the wall in front of them, they can see flickering shadows in the shape of people, trees, and animals. Because these images are all they've ever seen, they believe these images constitute the real world. One day, a prisoner escapes his bonds. He looks behind him and sees that what he thought was the real world was actually an elaborate set of shadows, which free people create with statues and the light from a fire. Statues are the real world, not the shadows. Then he is freed from the cave altogether, sees the actual world for the first time. He has a difficult time adjusting his eyes to the bright light. That happens for Neo, but he eventually does. Fully aware of the true reality, he returns to the cave to try to teach others what he knows. So that's a pretty old idea. And there's also Descartes. Descartes' whole idea that everything he knows, everything he thinks he knows, could be tricked by the devil. So he gives multiple examples of any time when he's mistaken about a thing, like he sees a mirage, or he looks at a thing and he thinks it's one thing, but it's actually a different thing. So he gives evidence that he can't really trust his senses. So he could be, for all he knows, a brain in a vat, which is like the modern philosophical argument, the brain in the vat argument. That you're just a brain in a vat and you're being fed stimuli. And since in the movie they even talk about how everything is just electrical impulses interpreted by your brain, that you could just be a brain in a vat being fed all the sensory information into your little brain, and you would not know the difference.
Essentially, that's what the people in the pods are, right? In the battery fields and fields of them. They're just sitting there, and they're getting this construct built around them. And don't they say something along the lines like, hey, we chose this period, 1999, because it was the height of humanity, and we introduced, like normal crime and other problems and issues because when we had it be perfect, the mind rejected it because it was too ideal or too perfect or something along those lines?
Yeah, they tell the story of the first person, whoever they put in the Matrix, the very first person, they gave them the power to change it however they wanted. And they lost entire crops because people would reject, the world because it didn't make sense to them. But and the movie is also heavily cribbed from a guy named Grant Morrison, who is a writer, comic book writer. He wrote a series called The Invisibles. And in that book, I can't exactly remember the plot of The Invisibles, but I know that it's very similar to The Matrix, and that there is almost word for word the dialogue, the monologue by Agent Smith when he's talking to Morpheus, where he talks about human beings being a disease. So, I mean, the Wachowskis were drawing from all kinds of influences and straight rip-offs in some situations. There's a lady.
The rap game.
The what?
It's like the rap game, or like the Harry Potter series. Lift bits and pieces of every little thing and compile it in your own new way, your own beat, and rap over it.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's art.
Right. Yeah, you're sampling. You're sampling other stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Right? No IP, right? So,
yeah.
It's out there, man.
Hey, before you get too much further into another one, let's talk about this first one because it sounds to me like it's a theory by someone that we're going to link their article down below. But what do you make of it? Do you buy it, or do you have a critique of it? Do you see something different? Like, what's your personal view of it?
Of which one? The Marx, the
Marx
Descartes,
one.
the Plato.
Well, of course, there's elements of all of them, but I mean, do you really think it's about the Marxian struggle against the bourgeoisie and that?
I think that's a perfectly fine way to look at it. I couldn't if someone were to come up to me and say that movie is all about the struggle of the workers against the bourgeoisie, I'd go, well, you're not wrong. It is the struggle of human beings versus a fighting against controllers. So, and there's plenty of good evidence. I mean, in the movie, there's the book, the Simulacrum and Simulation book, which is all about being exploited by representations or imitations of things. And he was directly influenced by Marx. So that seems pretty clear. Now, it's not all about communism, and it's just a piece of communism. It's just the whole exploitation part. And as an anarchist, well, they're also anarchists, I suppose, kind of, maybe. Their end goal was. But the idea that you're being exploited by like a business owner because you happen to work for them, well, that's just ridiculously false. Being born into bondage, a slave to the market, is very much like this Peter Joseph. I mean, he didn't come up with it, but it's like that ANCOM idea, like you have no choice to participate in the market, therefore market is slavery and control.
Right, because scarcity is such a bitch.
Right. Well, yeah, they're not wrong about scarcity being a bitch. It's true, but it's real. That's the way it is. I mean, I would like you to sandwich yourself in this guy, but they don't. So, you got to make do. So in one sense, I would say it's a very good critique of the movie. The idea that if you're going to take it for the fact that, or the idea that it is about the people's struggle against the controlling rulers, then yeah, it's dumb because you're not being exploited by the people you work for or the people that it's a voluntary relationship. Now you're being attacked by the ruling class, by these politicians. They go run around making the laws and attack people, but you're also being attacked by your neighbors who vote for these laws and vote for these politicians. So to say that it's like this class struggle where the poor working man is just being exploited by these maniacal business owners who are just trying to create value and accurately predict the future market and putting their wealth at stake, and these entrepreneurs, it rings fairly false. So if you look at it from that point of view, it's kind of a dumb movie. But it's also a science fiction movie, and it's also about, hey, this is the world we created. This is the situation. if you were in this situation, wouldn't you fight back? Wouldn't you try and fight these people? It's only when you're looking through that lens and saying, well, if they meant this, then it's dumb. But as a story, it's perfectly fun and great. If we were to actually, human beings were actually to create this AI, and we already do have some AI, but if it ever comes to the point where it's like Skynet and attacking us and killing us, there would be a struggle, and it would be terrible. So, but as an allegory for, exploitation, well, I think it doesn't hold its water there. Or if it is accurately that, which it seems to accurately be that, then it's dumb, because I don't believe that because you work at a place that they're exploiting you.
Yeah, so the Matrix, when they're in the pods and being used as fuel, they clearly are being exploited, but it's not as if there are classes of people. Everyone's in there, right, except the ones that have been able to escape or been released by the resistance. So unless I'm having trouble with this Marxism thing. I mean, granted, you've got the book that's related to a guy who's influenced by another guy who was a communist, but I see it more as in the function of a socialist society. That's where you would have the most amount of control over your person and your individual choices. So to me, I see a resistance to that. I mean, Neo is hiding the money or the thing that he's selling on the black market, which is the market, in exchange for money.
Right.
In that book. So it's like a tongue-in-cheek, like, fuck you to Marx. In my, if I look at just that isolated thing, like, hey, I'm going to have this commie book on my shelf, and when the authorities come and, like, ransack my place, they won't ever look in this book because they've got probably the same book, and that's where my contraband is, and that's where I'm stashing my money.
That's a good point. That is interesting. That could be what they meant by that. It's hard to say. So
yeah,
you don't see it as exploitation, because the machines absolutely are exploiting the people for their electricity.
As do politicians and any socialist government. They exploit the people, turn them against each other.
Yeah.
They put those distractions on the cave wall, right? The bread and circuses, the media, pitting people against each other, dividing them among racial lines or socioeconomic status, or the Marxian class ideas of worker versus the bourgeoisie. It's all about dividing people, and that is contrary to voluntary interaction. Whereas, when people escape the Matrix and they're in this quote-unquote real world, they are making individual choices. They're running around on their own volition. So, I can see where this guy who wrote this article can see what he's theorizing, but I can also argue that, there are other elements that are counter to that. And personally, since I don't believe in Marxian theory, and there's so many holes in it, and we can get into that in another episode if you want, it seems like a weird thing to be creating a story out of to I don't know, kind of support, but it also might be why it's so popular. I mean, this was a very popular film. People identified with it. They likened it to things that were happening in the present day, right? Like, people's eyes are clouded to, the real reality of things. But it seems to me like there are many, many different theories that people all think they know something that everyone's clouded from. You know what I mean? And so they read into it what they want.
Sure.
And, I mean, I'm kind of doing the same thing, but I feel like we have a direct line to a truth that our perspective is, hey, the non-aggression principle, voluntary interactions are the best and only moral way to accomplish things. And, I mean, I don't want to sound like an absolutist, but I kind of am in certain principles. I'm dogmatic in that. I'm not wishy-washy in it. And I know that people want to be, quote-unquote, open-minded, and hence wishy-washy, because, they want to be open to hearing people's ideas. But if those ideas are about the initiation of violence, even if they don't see it that way, but that's what it boils down to, I will discount those ideas because they are immoral, they're false, they're wrong. Your comment?
Well, sure. So let's just, and we're speculating here, because I don't think the Wachowskis have ever come out and said this is what this movie is about. And I think that would probably be dumb if they did. It's way more interesting for the audience to sit around and speculate and wonder and have it mean different things to different people. That's what art's all about. You don't sit there and say, well, this is what I meant it to be. I mean, some people do that, but I think it lessens the power of the art. So you let it be everything to all people, or as many people as find value in it. That's great.
Right. I mean, there's people who have made a whole religion out of this, correct? Like, I think I shared a video with you a couple of years ago, and it was probably like 4 or 5 hours long, but it's like how Neo's a Christ figure, and they actually built a full-blown religion on it, right?
Well, there's definitely that view that Christ or that Jesus is a mythological or a Jesus figure, a Buddha figure, whatever, some sort of a religious figure, which is interesting to look at because, he is the one. This is his journey. He's going to defeat the evil, and then he, dies, and he gets reborn. So he is pretty much a Jesus figure. It's interesting if you look at it as a Jesus figure because in the first movie, Neo is essentially breaking loose from the Matrix and showing other people that they can break loose from the Matrix, and he's trying to free people and, take down the controllers. And in the first movie, you could say that, okay, Neo represents freedom. Well, in the second movie, when Neo is talking to the architect, who's the one who has basically designed and built the Matrix, he explains how Neo, this concept of the one and this repetitive use of the one, is actually just another tool of control. And then from time to time, you keep having this. Every once in a while, you'll have a one, and he'll lead up some sort of rebellion, and it lets people blow off some steam and feel like they've won, basically having some sort of a revolution. And then it just settles back into the same boss, new boss, same as the old boss situation.
All right, so that's the relief valve reset. That's our discussion about Alex Jones, right? Like, he gets angry enough for everybody, so by listening to him, you don't have to get as angry because you've vented that or whatever,
Sure. Or just the idea of revolution as a way of solving anything. Revolutionaries are just bureaucrats waiting to happen. So you have a revolution. They start some new government. It's great for 2 seconds for all the people that didn't get murdered. And then it devolves into horror again, like all governments do. So as the Matrix, Neo represents freedom, in the second movie, as a Jesus figure, they would be saying that since Neo is another tool of control, they might be saying that religion is just another means of control, which, is just essentially I don't think is a very controversial thing to say, as religions make prescriptions, they influence behavior, they make proclamations, they essentially, they have a list of do's and don'ts. So they are essentially, if not in full actuality, then they're not anymore necessarily a tool of coercion and violence, although from time to time they still are. You still have honor killings and all kinds of murder in the Islamic world, and hell, there's even that church over in New York where somebody wanted to leave the church, and they're like, "You're not leaving the church," and it's his own kid or his nephew or something. And did you hear about this? I don't know. And then they ended up keeping him in a church basement for 3 days, talking to him interrogation style, why are you leaving the church? Don't leave the church. And at the end of the day, they're like, we can't convince you to not leave the church. We're going to beat you to death. And they ended up beating him to death and murdering him. So religion does attack and murder, but they don't necessarily have cops that run around and, force you to do what they say. They used to more and more. Back in the day, they would have inquisitors who would run around, and if you said anything that went against the church, they'd murder you or flog you or whatever, set you on fire if they thought you were a witch. But not so much these days. These days, it's more of a voluntary situation, but still a tool of control. Comment?
No, that's interesting. I actually know a friend of mine I met, again, at my high school reunion recently, who just in the past year left the Mormon church. And he said that was a harrowing experience, but his wife and his kids still go. So that's got to be tough. But it's kind of weird stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of peer pressure associated with that. It's one thing. I mean, he's very much a Jesus Christ figure in that he is the one. He's there to free everybody. He dies. He gets reborn. That sort of thing. Or you could even see him as a Buddha being reincarnated because there's been multiple ones over and over and over again. Any sort of messianic figure.
Yeah, okay. Well, hey, let's get into some specific elements. What do you make of there is no spoon? What's your thoughts on that? When he meets the Oracle for the first time and the kid says there is no spoon. The world is not what you think it is. The world is just your perception. That's what I usually take away from that. But that's a fairly basic takeaway. I don't really know if I've got anything super enlightening to say about that. Right, but once he realizes that it's not really there, then he can move it with his mind or bend it with his mind? Does that mean anything to you?
Well, just that the line in the movie is that you realize that it's not the spoon that bends, it's you that bends. So in order to see the world a different way, you need to change. And that's a fine message. I mean, from a self-ownership angle, you don't need to change the world. You don't need to go around and attack people and force other people to do what you're going to do. You can change yourself and change the world that way, I suppose. That's one way to look at it.
Yeah, that reminds me of a John Wooden quote. In one of his books, he says, you don't need to be the best at any one thing. You just need to be the best that you can be, because you can't control anyone who's better than you. You can only control what you can do, so you can aspire to be the best of your ability.
Sure, yeah. John Wooden, I'm not familiar with that
guy. John Wooden was the coach of the UCLA Bruins, won the most number of NCAA championships, had Bill Walton and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then known as Lou Alcindor, as his college players back in the day.
Probably not too shocking that they won a bunch of championships then. So you got those two guys on the team. Not to say he's not a good coach. I mean, he's probably good.
It's like Phil Jackson having Jordan and Pippen and then Shaq and Kobe. And you kind of like, okay, he's got some of the best players in the league at any given time. So, how great is he? And, he's probably a really good coach. I mean, he's obviously paid well and he gets the marquee positions and all that stuff. But, you kind of have that question, right?
Yeah, but there's also a skill in team building. So, he probably had something to do with them getting those players. I don't know if he was just handed them. So even if you're not the greatest coach, you can still be a really good team builder. Or, it takes all kinds of talent. It's like I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about, I think they're actually talking about the Wachowskis, believe it or not. Yeah, it was actually Fat Man and Batman. They're talking about the Wachowskis. And Kevin Smith was talking about how, even though the Wachowskis really aren't that great a filmmaker anymore, and I would argue maybe they never were, and maybe they just got lucky with, they made Bound, which was really good. They made The Matrix, which was really good. And then they've kind of fallen off the map. They've done some good stuff, but they had more misses than hits, let's put it that way. And they've actually lost quite a fair amount of money. But they keep making these big budget movies. And being able to make those movies, just being able to get them made, just being able to get them financed is a skill. It takes a lot of skill and effort and ability just to convince other people that you can still do this, that they can make a profit, that just to, even if you're not the greatest filmmaker, but it's getting your movie made should be considered part of the equation when you're talking about great filmmakers. Because you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you can't sell it to anybody, it's not going to get made. So how good of a filmmaker are you really?
Interesting take, yeah. Because they had a whole history of being very skilled, or at least getting lucky enough to get on people's radar, so people were willing to finance their films, and they were able to get further and further along in their careers. And I imagine that they're better at their craft in many ways, but perhaps they're not meeting the demands of their audiences, their customers.
Yeah, they've made some serious bombs lately. So not necessarily like the worst movies. I don't know if you saw Jupiter Ascending. It was like this giant, expensive, overblown, not great movie. But, hey, man, they got it made. And I don't know if that's just on their name alone. Don't know. But they've had a lot more misses than hits lately, and they're still working. So good for them.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I wanted to bring up, I found the book the John Wooden book. It's called Wooden on Leadership. And it's actually one of the books that's part of that service. That's where I'd picked this up from. That Read It For Me, or Read It For .me. And we'll have a link to it on our page here. But if you click through and enjoy the service, we'll get a little bonus. So check it out.
Check it.
All right, so back to the spoon thing. So it's when he's waiting to meet with the Oracle. And I think they mentioned that she's meeting with potentials, right? So there's a bunch of young kids there. Like Neo's the oldest. He's the only adult there. And there's a bunch of kids waiting to meet with her. And I think that's related to, they say that they only typically release young minds because the older ones have grown so accustomed to being in the Matrix that if they get released, they don't accept the actual reality. Does that sound about right to you, that description of that?
Yeah, and I think I know where you're going with this. At least I know which way I would take it from what you're saying. If you're looking at it from our perspective, I would say that the ideas of anarchy are fairly non-normal. Statist world is a normal world, I guess you could call it. It's what everybody believes. It's 95%, 98%. It is. And if you're talking about trying to introduce people to the ideas that taxation is theft, violence is immoral, which everybody believes, but then government is immoral, and oh, wait a minute, what? So, voting is immoral. These ideas are fairly controversial just because people have been living in the state for so long. If you were to teach, a kid hey, hitting is wrong. And they're like, oh yeah, okay, hitting is wrong. And then you kept that up. You don't like, hitting is wrong when you're doing it to another person, but when you get to a state level, then it's perfectly fine. You stay consistent all throughout. Yeah, it would be different, but people don't do that. For some reason, you try to adapt to the world you live in, because human beings are adaptive, and they see that that's how you get things done. You petition the government, you vote. That's how you make things happen, through violence. So
the marketplace of ideas, grassroots efforts, blah, blah, blah. Same old shit.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the point here is get them while they're young, before they've fully adopted the ideas that have been fed down their throats. Because, if you think about it, governments got their hands on kids from a very young age, all the way up through college, and then continuing on through the education system, through media, through so many avenues. And once people are kind of stuck in their ways, they don't see beyond the reality that they understand. Murray has a great bit, and I can plug it in here, where he talks about trying to expand on Austrian economics and libertarianism. He says, you got to go after the young, the kids. Like, you don't go to, it was George Stigler or Milton Friedman at the time. You don't go to those guys and try to convert them to Austrianism, because they're too far down the path. They're old guys who have been doing it for 50 years, 60 years. They're not going to change from the paradigm that they understand. You got to get the young. So I'll plug that in right here.
This is why, by the way, strategically, if you're I'm leaping here, if you're an Austrian, you shouldn't spend your time trying to convert Paul Samuelson, let's say, or Milton Friedman. These guys are not going to be converted. They're locked into their paradigm. The people you convert are people who are just coming up, new people on the fence, graduate students. These are people who be converted. You don't waste your time trying to convert Samuelson, or Friedman, or whoever the other paradigm people are. So the war is for the souls of the people coming up, so to speak.
Yeah, you go, Murray. Good job, buddy. All I can do is reiterate that. You don't go to an old folks' home. You go to, the schools, or you go to, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all revolutions start with the young people, if you want to say that. If you think revolutions, or if you even want to call anarchy a revolution, I don't know.
Yeah, I think based on your comments earlier saying that revolutions just reset the cycle, maybe we want to call it something else. Because I'm not calling for a violent insurrection, like Morpheus said in the clip that we played earlier, that someone has to fight them. I don't advocate that per se. I think it's an intellectual revolution, or an educational revolution, where people come to understand the things that they learned in kindergarten, like you were saying a minute ago, where hitting and stealing and all those things are bad, and just keep that up. Continue with that thought. Apply it universally. Apply it to everything. Is this morally correct or incorrect? Am I stealing from somebody, even if it's just me voting for someone to go steal from someone? How is that any different than me doing it myself, other than I'm offsetting the cost of that violence? I'm socializing that cost versus, if I went to my neighbor and said, hey, give me 30% of everything you got, or I'm going to, use a weapon against you. Well, they could defend themselves from that. But if I say, hey, me and the neighborhood boys got together and voted, and hey, you got to give us 30% of your stuff. Yeah,
that cost is just distributed among all those people. Absolutely. And in governments, it's even worse. It gets distributed over millions of people. So it's incredibly cheap, and it leads to a massive prevalence of violence. Because how easy is it? How easy to initiate force against someone? You check a box. That's how easy it is to initiate force against other people. And not just one person. Millions of people. Millions of people who voted no or abstained. And it's getting in here. Sorry. Tornado. NEM. Twister. Can you hear?
You're a little fuzzy. You sound like Tron.
Yeah, there's all of a sudden a tornado flew in town. Is that better?
Yeah, you sound a lot better. You sound like you're in a different, more open, cavernous type space. There's a slight echoey, not a soft sound, but it's great. I can hear you very clearly now.
Okay, good. Because, I was on the front porch of the cottage, and all of a sudden there were gale force winds. So now I'm inside. What was I saying? Don't know.
You were talking about diffusing the cost or socializing the cost of the violence through the political process, and keeping the people who voted no or abstained from voting, they are stuck with whatever got voted in. And so it's,
right.
Even if more people didn't vote or said no, even if that combined total was greater than the combined total that said yes, the yes still wins, which is pretty fucked up.
Right. And just it's how removed you are as a voter. That it's Well, I didn't see it until I didn't see it as violence for years and years and years and years because you're so removed from it. If you have to, go out and physically attack people to get what you want, it wouldn't happen. And see, that's one of the big criticisms of anarchy, saying, oh, it would just be gangs of people attacking each other all the time. No, it wouldn't. Because you actually have to physically go out and do this thing to get this thing that you want. There would be wolves, like there are now, who go out and attack people. That's not going away. But there would be far less violence. It wouldn't be this casual check-a-box violence. You'd actually have to go out and put your life on the line, put your reputation at risk. So there would be much less of it. If you had to go out and potentially die every time you wanted to steal a thing or rob a guy or whatever, maybe you might think of a better way of getting what you want instead of checking the box, voting for whatever to get more goodies from the fucking government trough.
Yeah, I agree. And if you really think about it, in that type of environment, if people were bearing the cost of that violence, there would be a market mechanism to respond to that would improve its level of quality and service to prevent those types of instances from happening. So over time, it would get more and more difficult to be able to steal or rob or commit violence against somebody. Like one of our previous episodes, we talked about if we had the wishes, the Aladdin's rubbing Aladdin's lamp of maximum freedom. You were talking about the device that could defend people from harm, and I was talking about the They Live X-ray goggles or X-ray glasses, sunglasses, so they could see through the lies and bullshit. And that's, kind of ties to what we're talking about here with the Matrix and having core principles of, you don't steal, you don't hit, you don't aggress against people, and just apply that in a universal sense. And even though you don't understand how that might work, how it might play out, it still is better than the alternative of knowing that you're using an immoral, violent means to accomplish those things today. I mean, I'll take not knowing and not violence versus knowing and violence. You know what I'm saying?
Right, and it doesn't take into account, it doesn't take, just because people say, well, I don't know how a thing would happen in a free society. Well, that doesn't even matter. The amount of knowledge is so specific in this world, it's so diversified. Like, I don't know how to build, I don't know how to make a pencil. I don't know, we've talked about that in the past, the myriad facets that go into every single product that we use. No one person knows everything. So just because you don't know how a thing gets done doesn't mean it wouldn't get done. We're so specialized. And the market finds a way. There's a need. The market finds a way to create that for you. So there's always who would build the roads? Well, road builders. Who would put up the fires? Well, firemen. Who would do this and who would do that? If there's a market mechanism, if it's a thing you desire, the market will rise to meet that. And you don't have to know how it works or even how it would happen or who would do it. Entrepreneur, that's the beauty of human ingenuity. It's like the whole Malthusian idea that, we're running out of resources and we're having too many people and that sort of thing. It doesn't take into account human ingenuity and advances in technology that allow for greater and greater numbers of people to be fed and to whatever. Like every person is born with two hands and a brain. And these brains can do amazing things.
Well, in fact, they're the only things that accomplish anything of value, right? Like it's man's mind. Ayn Rand talks about that. Did I say that right? Ayn Rand? Yeah. Where any creation comes from, as far as the physical world that we live in today, outside of like religious people, it has to be first conceived in the mind of man to be achieved, to gather the means necessary to accomplish these things, to build things, to build societies and build products and cater to the needs and services, provide services to people. I mean, all that starts with a mind, right? And that's the last vestige that you have is your ability to think. As far as that's the one thing they can't really take away from you. Though I guess they do in 1984, right at the very end, they finally take his ability to think.
Yeah, they do. And they've convinced people that violence is a way to get things done and a moral means and the government is good. So they have corrupted the thoughts of the people. So that's true. And the machines have tricked people, the people that are the batteries, that the Matrix is the real world. Yeah.
Yeah, well, interesting stuff. Any more comment regarding the Matrix? Do you want to explore anything else further, or do we want to start winding down? I know you have a place to be soon.
Yeah, we could get into a little bit about the sequels, but honestly, it would be more like a criticism. I know that philosophy video series you sent me that's super long, and the guy gets really into it. He thinks the sequels, the whole trilogy is all fantastic, and it's all very intricate and means a whole lot. But from a film viewing standpoint, the second and third movies really fell on their face storytelling-wise, and yeah, they're a lot harder to watch, just nowhere near the pacing and the seamlessness that the first one was. But so I don't really have a whole lot of comments on that other than just be criticizing the Wachowskis as filmmakers. There are interesting things to go into, but I'm not as prepared to discuss.
No, that's fine. I kind of figured that the sequels were a trash bin fire and then a dumpster fire. You know, they got progressively kind of weirder and not as good.
Yeah, there was like one interview where I forget who it was. Who were the production guys? The Weinsteins or Silver? One of the producers. I think the second or the third movie where they were going, you know, what's this movie going to be like? And he's going, oh, it's going to be awesome. We spent like $200 million on this one scene. It's fantastic. There's all this stuff going on. It's amazing. It's like, that's what you're talking about? That's all you can trumpet is the fact that you spent all the money on some big, complex, busy, noisy action sequence? You know, not great. I mean, I know the idea was that the first movie was like the beginning, like the freeing of the messianic figure, and then the second and the third movies are like the war. And they made a lot of choices that were like really weird, really dumb. Like, why would the guys that stood in those mech suits, why would they have no protection? They're just like standing out in the open. Just like, I got this big clunky mech suit and I can't move very fast and I can shoot guns, but all you gotta do is get close to me or shoot me in any way at any distance, and then I die because I have zero protection. Why? Every other military design of anything ever is covering the body, like from medieval knight armor suits to tanks to any kind of thing. You're covering any kind of body armor. You're covering like your vital organs in your brain and your head. But this is like completely exposed. I could go on, but it is dumb.
Well, maybe they were cutting corners in the budget and just using a bunch of leftover mech suits from like Alien or Aliens or whatever.
It did kind of look like the autoloader from Aliens a little bit. You repaint it and add some guns on the end, then you take away the cage that surrounds her. Maybe it kind of looked like that, but yeah, I don't know. They had so much money, so much time. They really could have come up with a better idea. But anyway, I'm just nitpicking. Whatever, you know.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, I think that's probably good regarding that amount of the discussion of The Matrix 2 and 3, because they are kind of crap fests. But let's start drawing this to a close. I want to bring up a quote that's related to the opening that we talked about, that Marxist theory that you said. It might be like that story of exploitation, and we brought up Peter Joseph, who's complaining about nature and scarcity being a reality. So there's a quote, and I want you to deconstruct it with me, and then we can let you go.
All right.
All right. So here's the quote. It says, "We are the only species that pays to live on this planet." What do you got for me?
Wrong. All species do. Every species that wants to live has to gather something. They have to take in nutrients. That's such horseshit. Plants absorb sunlight. Yes, they get it sent down to them essentially for free, but they are competing for it. They have to grow taller to outgrow their competition for this sunlight. They have to grow away. They have to whatever. All animals pay. They just don't have dollars and bills that they carry around with them. They compete for everything. Lions compete for gazelles. Deer compete with predators. They're trying to kill them. They're trying to get away from them. Everything competes. Everything pays. What does that even mean, that they don't pay?
Well, that's the Peter Joseph thing, like, I have to get a job so I can afford to participate in the market and buy food and pay rent. And my mom and dad had to have jobs when I was growing up, and I'm angry at capitalism for it.
Well, I would argue that everybody has a job. Everything has a job. Wolves have a job. They have to hunt. That's a job. People who've never hunted, that's hard. You have to track things, attacking. You're putting your life on the line. You could get killed hunting something quite easily.
Yeah, so this is just a misunderstanding of what payment is, right? Like what money is used for. Like just because wolves and sheep and plants don't use currency, it doesn't mean they don't pay. And currency isn't the only way we pay for things. Like we have to do things. We have to engage our means to achieve our ends. That's paying.
Absolutely. We spend energy. We spend time. Those are forms of currency.
Yeah, I've heard it argued that money is just your stored labor. Like it's the surplus that you have been able to gain from what you've provided, and then you can then use it in a fungible way towards other things, right, in a marketplace. So like you've worked, you've created something, you get something in return for that in a voluntary way, and now you can essentially time shift that labor that you've expended into getting something else later on down the road. And the more you save, the more you have available to devote to things. And this is how entrepreneurs start businesses or buy equipment. They save up enough to be able to do that kind of thing. And so it's kind of like this goes back to the crazy ideas of socialism, where the workers want to own the means of production. Like we said in the last episode, well, where do the means of production come from? Like, what means of production are they going to take over if no one is going to save up enough to create them? It doesn't make any fucking sense. It's stupid. This whole socialism and ANCOM ideas and this, nature is not just going to give me whatever I want immediately with no work and effort on my part. Like this whole comment, this whole, quotation, we're the only species that pays to live on this planet, is so absolutely false. Like, there's no truth to this at all. Everything pays in some way. They can't just sit there and expect things to be provided to them for nothing, no effort whatsoever. Even if you were given something, you still have to expend some effort to consume it, right? Like, this is so fucking stupid.
Yeah, and everybody spends time. Nobody has an infinite amount of time. So everybody's spending time to do a thing, to do anything. So it's just a weird quote. Who said that quote? It's real dumb, and it's the kind of thing that's like, if you just think about it for less than a second, nothing gets by without cost. Otherwise, you would have one thing. I don't know. You're always in a competition. If there was zero cost to it, anything, you would have an infinite amount of it, and there is no such thing as an infinite amount of anything. So everything has limitations.
So another thing that's on the state book on my cousin's feed is about Hillary Clinton, and apparently the emails that were leaked apparently prove interventions that she took or participated in against Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. And I guess it's kind of they're trying to say that Venezuela is a shit show because the greedy American capitalist politicians made it a shit show. It's fucking weird. It's a shit show because it's a shit show because it's socialism. That's why it's a shit show.
But that's their big champion. They love socialism. So are they saying that it's a shit show because of Hillary's fault? Yeah,
they're saying that Hillary participated in sabotaging relations between the U.S. and Venezuela, and that's why it's so bad there.
Right. That's why Venezuela can't afford. That's why they can't pay their bills. That's why they're having runaway inflation. They can't afford basic food. They can't afford toilet paper. Right. Because of something that some politician in the United States did. I mean, politicians make things terrible, but it's socialism is what caused the shit show in Venezuela. Hugo Chavez and his socialist revolution, and the people that went along with it and didn't walk away from his dumb ass socialist goody teat.
Yeah, so just more crazy shit. But you were saying about time being a scarce resource. I think your time is scarce at this moment. So why don't we wrap this up? We've been the Read Rothbard Podcast. We run readrothbard.com. We've got books, lectures, articles, this podcast, a bunch of ways to support us. We've got a tip jar page, readrothbard.com/tipjar. We've got the Amazon links. We've got a bunch of other crap. So, yeah, check it out. Robert, do you have enough time to give us a little brief update on your book, or do you want to just say goodbye, folks?
It's only been, a couple days since we recorded the last episode. Not a lot going on. Can't really update much. So I've been working on it. That's all I can say.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been an interesting episode. I don't know if we actually came to any conclusions. Daniel, is The Matrix one of your favorite movies? I don't know. It's one of my favorite movies. Where do you hold it?
Well, it was until you told me all this Marxist bullshit.
Then it became even more of your favorite? You're like, yes.
Aye, comrade. Aye, comrade. All right, folks. Well, we'll do justice to you next time in the next episode. Not sure what it's going to be about, but I feel like we've got another good one in us somewhere.
I didn't hear any of that. Sorry. Something was breaking up.
That's okay. We're kind of rumbling to a crashing halt here. So, thanks a lot for joining us, folks. We do appreciate it. Check us out, readrothbard.com. We got the Facebook and all that stuff. And thanks again.
I love you guys. Be good.